It started on a bright, unassuming Tuesday morning. The kind of morning where the birds sang just a little louder, the sun lit up the fresh dew on the grass, and the suburban street looked like it had been plucked straight from a real estate brochure. But for Karen Hastings, none of that mattered. Her attention wasn't on the chirping birds or the sweet smell of honeysuckle wafting in the air. No, Karen had her eyes locked on the same thing that had irritated her for 3 days. Straight, the Johnsons' mailbox. To the average eye, it was hardly offensive. A little tilted, sure, maybe leaning a bit more to the left than right. The paint was slightly chipped around the edges, and the red flag had long since lost its spring, drooping as though it, too, was tired of the world. But to Karen, this was not just a mailbox. It was a threat to the standards of their neighborhood. Karen lived in Willow Grove Estates, a development known for its neat hedges, identically spaced driveways, and an HOA that had rules longer than a small town's legal code. While Karen wasn't technically on the HOA board, everyone knew she was their most vocal enforcer. She took her job as neighborhood watchdog seriously, too seriously. So, there she stood, sipping from her oversized, world's best neighbor mug, eyes narrowed across the street. The Johnsons were new, moved in only 3 months ago. Young couple, 2 kids, both parents worked long hours. Good people, but careless. Karen had watched them commit what she considered to be 3 neighborhood sins in under 2 weeks. They left their garbage bins on the curb overnight. They let their kids chalk the sidewalk with bright pastel doodles. And now, that ridiculous mailbox was threatening the visual harmony of Willow Grove. Karen stepped back inside, grabbed her phone, and scrolled to the number she'd saved long ago. City Code Enforcement. Her finger hovered for only a moment before pressing call. She adjusted her hair in the hallway mirror while the phone rang, already imagining the praise she'd receive from her neighbors for being so proactive. City Code Enforcement. How can I help you today? Came the voice on the other end. Yes. Hello, Karen began, her tone polished with faux concern. I'm calling to report a code violation. I live in Willow Grove Estates. Lovely neighborhood, really. But we have a mailbox situation that's simply gotten out of hand. The clerk on the other end, likely used to calls like this, asked for the address and a description. Karen gave, both with precision, even going so far as to describe the degree of the tilt in the faded numbers on the side. Got it, the voice said. We'll send someone out to take a look within the next few days. Thank you so much, Karen replied sweetly. It's about time someone did something. She ended the call with a satisfied nod, placed her phone back on the kitchen counter, and resumed her morning as if she'd just completed a civic duty of national importance. 2 days later, right on schedule, the white city inspection truck rolled up to the Johnsons' curb. Karen spotted it before it even slowed down. She was already at her window, peeking through the blinds with the kind of intensity that might make you think she was tracking a fugitive. The inspector stepped out, clipboard in hand, and examined the mailbox. He looked at it, made a note, took a single photo, and walked back to his truck. The whole thing took less than 5 minutes. Karen watched with smug satisfaction. She even allowed herself a celebratory snack, half a blueberry muffin and a glass of iced tea. Her shoulders were back, her jaw slightly raised, the embodiment of someone who believed justice had been served. As the truck pulled away, she allowed herself to envision what would come next. The Johnsons would receive a notice, of course. Maybe even a fine. They'd fix the mailbox out of embarrassment, perhaps even repaint the thing. And then, they'd start towing the line. She could already see it unfolding. Neater trash bins, chalk only on the backyard patio, perfectly edged lawns. All thanks to her. All because she cared enough to act. That evening, she sat on her front porch with a glass of Chardonnay watching as the Johnsons arrived home. She expected confusion when they saw the notice. Maybe frustration. But what she didn't expect was nothing. No drama. No panic. They walked in like any other evening, bags in hand, kids in tow. Karen's lips pursed in mild irritation. Maybe they hadn't seen it yet. Later that night, she sent a text to her friend Carol, who lived 2 streets over. Karen. Took care of that mailbox situation on Elmwood. Inspector came today. Should be fixed soon. Carol. Haha. You're too much. Honestly, you're like our HOA ninja. Karen smiled at that. HOA ninja. She liked the sound of it. She turned in for the night confident that once again she had restored order. She never even thought to look past her pristine flower beds. Never even glanced toward her backyard, the place she had ignored for most of spring. After all, what could possibly be wrong in her yard? It was the others who needed watching. And so, Karen went to sleep, smug and oblivious, not realizing that the very same inspector who had been at her neighbor's house had received a second complaint just hours after leaving Elmwood Lane, not realizing that the next address on the list was hers. 2 days after Karen's victorious phone call and the arrival of the inspector at the Johnsons' property, a peculiar sense of pride lingered in the air around her. She moved through her home with a self-assured lightness, rearranging throw pillows that didn't need rearranging, adjusting decorative bowls like she was preparing for a magazine shoot. Everything in its place. That's how she liked it. On Thursday morning, around 10:15 a.m., Karen was in the middle of vacuuming her already spotless living room rug when she heard the low, slow rumble of a familiar engine outside. Curious, she turned off the vacuum and peeked through the blinds. There it was again, a white city vehicle. Another inspector, clipboard, camera, sunglasses. He looked just like the one who had visited the Johnsons earlier in the week. Karen tilted her head, then furrowed her brow. He was parked in front of her house, not across the street, not next door. Her driveway. Karen blinked and instinctively stepped back from the window. A moment of uncertainty flickered through her usually confident expression. Why would an inspector be at her house? There must be some mistake. Maybe he had the wrong address. Maybe he was here for someone else nearby, or doing a routine patrol. But then he walked straight up her driveway. Karen's heart beat a little faster. She slipped on her house slippers, tightened the belt on her bathrobe even though she was fully dressed, and opened the front door just as the inspector reached the side of her house. "Excuse me," she called out, affecting her usual tone of composed authority. "Can I help you with something?" The inspector turned around calmly. He had a neutral expression, professional, unreadable. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "We received a complaint about overgrowth and possible code violations in your backyard. I'm here to take a look." Karen's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She felt the flush rising to her cheeks. "A complaint?" she asked, trying to recover. "From who?" "I can't say, ma'am," he replied, clearly rehearsed. "Anonymous reports are standard. I just need to take a look at the yard and document the current condition." Karen hesitated. Her backyard hadn't been on her radar in weeks. Maybe longer. She always took such care of the front. Flowers neatly planted, mulch freshly turned, hedges trimmed to perfection. But the backyard was different. Out of sight, out of mind. "Of course," she said, with a forced smile, stepping aside. "Please go ahead." She trailed him around the side of the house, nerves bubbling just beneath her skin. The gate to the backyard groaned when the inspector pushed it open. Karen flinched. She had meant to fix that hinge months ago. The backyard hit her like a slap in the face. The grass, once a tidy green carpet, now stood in wild, uneven tufts, some patches knee-high. Weeds had taken over the flower beds, pushing out the daffodils she'd planted in March. A plastic kiddie pool from last summer lay overturned and sun-bleached in the far corner. Worse yet, several rusting tools, an old rake, a broken hose reel, were half buried beneath a mess of ivy. And then There was the smell. Faint, but undeniable. An earthy, damp musk, like something had made a home back here. The inspector didn't react. He walked slowly, taking photos and jotting notes as if he saw yards like this every day. And he probably did. But to Karen, this was mortifying. She felt exposed, like the entire neighborhood had turned to look. Then came the worst of it. The inspector paused near a clump of tall grass behind her unused compost bin. He bent down slowly, squinting. Karen watched, trying to guess what he was seeing. He stepped back quickly and made a note. "Looks like some wildlife has been nesting back here," he said without turning around. "Might be raccoons." Karen's eyes widened. "Raccoons?" He nodded. "Probably just one or two, but if the vegetation stays like this, it could become a problem. They're drawn to overgrowth and clutter." Karen felt sick. She could already imagine it. Her name whispered at block parties, people warning their kids not to go near her fence. "The raccoon lady," she forced a nervous laugh. "That's just temporary. I've been meaning to get out here, but you know how things get. Busy. The inspector gave her a polite nod. "Understandable. Still, I'll have to file a report and send an official notice. Nothing serious yet, but you'll want to address it soon to avoid escalation." Karen nodded, swallowing hard. "Of course. I'll get on it right away." He handed her a small pamphlet, standard issue with information about yard maintenance and wildlife prevention. Then he turned, heading back toward the front of the house without another word. Karen stood in the middle of her neglected yard, utterly still. She could hear the click of the gate closing behind him, the faint sound of birds chirping again. How had she let it get this bad? Her kingdom of perfection had a gaping hole in the back, and now everyone would know. She hurried back inside, closing the door with more force than intended. The living room, so pristine just minutes ago, now felt hollow. The vacuum cleaner still sat in the middle of the floor like a relic of a simpler time. 10 minutes ago, when she still thought she was untouchable. Karen made herself a cup of coffee. She didn't want, sitting at her kitchen table and staring out the window, at nothing. Her mind raced. Who could have reported her? Was it Mr. Singh, who always waved a little too cheerfully? Or maybe the Johnsons, getting revenge for the mailbox incident? Could it have been someone just walking their dog, snapping a photo over the fence? The idea that someone had turned her in, that someone had judged her, was deeply unsettling. She prided herself on being the standard bearer of the block. She was the one who enforced the rules, not the one who got cited for breaking them, and yet there it was, a report, a visit, a possible raccoon infestation. Karen got up and pulled a yellow legal pad from a drawer. If she was going to fix this, she needed a plan, a landscaper, a cleanup crew, maybe even a pest control guy. She didn't care what it cost. She would fix it before anyone could snap another photo. But even as she scribbled down her urgent to-do list, Karen couldn't shake the irony. She had spent so much time policing her neighbors, she hadn't realized. Her own backyard was quietly falling apart. One weed, one forgotten chore, one ignored corner at a time. It didn't take long for the news to spread. In Willow Grove Estates, nothing stayed a secret for more than a few hours, especially when it involved Karen Hastings. Within minutes of the inspector's white truck pulling away from her driveway, cameras had clicked, texts had been sent, and screenshots were already flying through the neighborhood group chat like wildfire. Mr. Singh, who lived 2 doors down and owned one of those doorbell cameras with a surprisingly good zoom, had caught the whole visit on video. He didn't usually get involved in neighborhood drama, but even he couldn't resist when he realized that Karen, the very woman who had spent years hounding people for leaving a single leaf on their lawn, was now the subject of a code enforcement visit herself. The video didn't capture any audio, but the visual was enough. Karen's arms folded across her chest, the inspector gesturing toward her backyard, Karen nodding with what appeared to be forced composure, the pamphlet exchange, And finally, the look on her face as she walked back inside her house. She looked like someone who had just tasted expired milk in front of a live audience. The video was posted in the Willow Grove neighborhood watch chat with a caption that read simply, "Plot twist. Karen gets a visit of her own." The group chat exploded. Lindsay, no way. Is this real? Tom, she finally got busted for something? I thought she was untouchable. Rosa, check your own backyard, Karen. Mr. Singh, video doesn't lie. I wasn't trying to snoop. It just popped up. Jenna. Ironic, considering she called code on us for having a dangerous wind chime last summer. Even people who had never personally tangled with Karen chimed in with laughing emojis and long-held grievances. One woman mentioned that Karen had once knocked on her door to complain that her recycling bin was visibly overstuffed. Another claimed Karen had left a passive-aggressive note about inconsistent holiday decor on her porch. Now, those same people were sharing memes, reacting with glee, and marveling at the delicious symmetry of it all. The queen of neighborhood standards had been dethroned by her own neglect. Meanwhile, across the street, the Johnsons were sitting on their porch with a glass of lemonade and a quiet kind of vindication. They hadn't said a word about Karen's earlier complaint about their mailbox. Not to her, not online, not even in the group chat. But they were watching now and enjoying every minute. A few neighbors wandered over for casual small talk, which quickly became not-so-subtle commentary. On recent events, did you hear the city's cracking down on backyard maintenance now? Mr. Singh said with a perfectly straight face. Really, said Rachel from down the block. That's good. Some yards around here have been looking a little wild. Oh, I'm sure people are just busy, added Tom, barely hiding his grin. You forget one mowing session and boom, raccoon condo. The Johnsons laughed quietly, sipping their drinks, saying nothing. There was no need. The neighborhood was saying it all for them. Inside her house, Karen sat at her kitchen table, unaware of the digital trail her shame was leaving. She was too focused on her cleanup mission. After the inspector left, she had gone into full crisis. Mode, the lawn care company, had been called. Appointments scheduled. Pest control booked. She even ordered new garden gloves and an industrial weed trimmer online. Same-day delivery. She wasn't just going to fix the backyard. She was going to reclaim her throne, reinvent her image, control the narrative. Whatever whispers were already starting would be silenced by the sheer brilliance of her comeback. But outside her bubble, the whispers had already grown into full conversations, and the backyard jungle had taken on a mythology of its own. Someone, no one knew who, dubbed it the Forbidden Forest. Within hours, people were joking that they should list it as a tourist destination on Google Maps. Another neighbor, a retired English teacher, wrote a tongue-in-cheek poem about Karen's wild yard and posted it on the bulletin board by the EU community pool. It ended with the line, "Beware the hedge that hides the throne, for judgment's seeds were self-sown." It got 5 likes in under 10 minutes. Even kids got in on the fun. A group of middle schoolers walked by Karen's house, giggling, daring each other to peek through the fence and report on what they saw. "I think I saw a raccoon with sunglasses," one boy said, breathless with laughter. He waved at me. Karen finally caught on to the outside chatter when she logged into the group chat that evening. She hadn't opened it since before the mailbox saga. Now, she saw the video, the comments, the jokes. Her hands clenched the phone tighter than necessary. Her first instinct was outrage. How dare they? After everything she had done for this neighborhood, the time she spent monitoring, the emails she sent, the calls she made, this was her reward? But as she scrolled further, her emotions shifted. There was no real malice in the comments. They weren't angry. They were relieved, amused. It wasn't revenge. It was release. Years of walking on eggshells around her had erupted in this one moment of harmless schadenfreude. And somewhere, buried beneath the sting of embarrassment, Karen realized something. She had made herself the neighborhood's judge, jury, and enforcer, but she had never given herself the same scrutiny. She never expected her backyard would be the one in violation, her lawn the one whispered about, her oversight the punchline of a community joke. That night she sat in her living room and did something she hadn't done in years. She turned off her phone, turned off the TV, and she thought. Not about her next complaint, not about who left their trash cans out, but about how much easier life would be if she just let go. Just a little. Maybe it was okay to have a crooked mailbox. Maybe kids drawing on sidewalks wasn't the end of civilization. Maybe it was fine to let the hedges grow half an inch past regulation if it meant your weekends weren't filled with judgment and stress. The forbidden forest had humbled her. The raccoons had taught her more than any HOA handbook ever could. The next morning, she opened her backyard gate for the landscapers. She waved politely to Mr. Singh. She smiled, even if it felt awkward. And when she passed the Johnsons walking to their car, she nodded and said, "Good morning." No sarcasm, no tone, just human. She didn't know it yet. But that tiny gesture, just a nod, just a good morning, would spark something far more powerful than any code violation ever could. By the following weekend, Karen's backyard was nearly unrecognizable. What had once resembled a forgotten patch of wilderness had transformed into a clean, neatly trimmed, professionally mulched retreat. The overgrown grass was gone, replaced by a soft, even lawn that sparkled with dew. Each morning, the flower beds had been reborn with fresh soil and bright spring perennials, sunburst marigolds, white petunias, and a few pops of purple salvia. The rusted tools were hauled away, the old kiddie pool trashed, and the compost bin, once a hideout, for raccoons, now stood upright, scrubbed, and odorless. Karen had spared no expense. She hired a landscaping crew for the heavy lifting, but she also put in the work herself, gloved hands in the dirt, trimming hedges, hauling bags of mulch, wiping sweat from her forehead. Neighbors who happened to walk by during those hours observed with a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. There was something almost surreal about watching Karen, the unofficial ruler of neighborhood order, actually laboring in her own yard like a common resident, like everyone else. The group chat quieted. No one had much to say anymore, at least not out loud. The jokes had run their course. The backyard had been tamed. And Karen, to everyone's surprise, wasn't retaliating. She hadn't sent out a passive-aggressive email, hadn't mentioned the video, hadn't made a single snide comment about someone else's lawn in over a week. It was weird, peaceful even. By Sunday afternoon, Karen was finally done. She sat on her newly pressure-washed deck, sipping iced tea and watching a bluebird dart from tree to tree. For once, there was no mental checklist running through her head. No thoughts of who needed to be reported, no internal scorecard tracking, who had trimmed their hedges or left their trash bins out 10 minutes past the pickup window. She was, strangely, at peace. But it wasn't just her yard that had changed. Something had softened in Karen herself. The change had been subtle, the way a glacier slowly shifts course. It started with the shame of being exposed, of course. The public fall from grace. But somewhere between the embarrassment and the rebuilding came a sliver of clarity, of self-awareness. She had become the very thing she once hated, the neighbor who turned community into competition, who used rules as weapons, who forgot that behind every crooked mailbox and slightly overgrown lawn was a real person, someone tired, someone juggling life, someone doing their best. That Monday morning, Karen did something unexpected. She baked muffins, real ones, from scratch, banana walnut with just a hint of cinnamon. She packed them neatly into a wicker basket and walked across the street to the Johnsons' house. Her hand hovered in the air for a moment before she knocked. When the door opened, it was Anna Johnson who answered, holding her toddler on one hip and wearing a slightly suspicious expression. Karen gave a sheepish smile. "Hi," she said. "I brought muffins." Anna blinked. "Muffins?" Karen nodded, then let out a short laugh. "I realize I'm probably the last person you expected to be handing you baked goods, but I owe you and your family an apology for the mailbox thing and, well, everything else." Anna looked down at the basket, then back at Karen. Slowly, her features softened. "You didn't have to do that," Anna said, stepping aside. "But thank you. That's really kind." Karen hesitated. "Would you mind if I just said something quickly?" Anna nodded. "I realized," Karen said, voice low and genuine, "that I was spending more time trying to enforce the rules than I was actually being part of the neighborhood. I forgot we're supposed to look out for each other, not look for ways to catch each other messing up. I let it get personal, and that's on me." Anna smiled. "Well, it takes a lot to admit that, and we all have our moments. Besides," she added with a playful look, "your backyard looks amazing now." Karen chuckled. "Yeah, turns out when you stop judging other people's yards, you notice your own needs a lot of work." They talked for a few more minutes. Nothing. Deep, just casual neighborhood chat. And when Karen left, she felt lighter than she had in years. That same afternoon, she took a walk around the block. Not to check for violations or write mental notes, but just to walk, to wave at people, to listen. She even stopped to chat with Rosa about the wildflowers blooming near the sidewalk and offered to help Mr. Singh fix his leaning fence. Not because it was a code issue, but because she'd always admired his rose garden and finally realized he could use a hand. The neighborhood, slowly, began to shift in return. People who had kept their distance started waving more often. Conversations bloomed where there had once been polite nods. Kids rode their bikes past Karen's house without nervous glances. Someone even chalked a rainbow on the sidewalk in front of her yard, and she left it there. She didn't just tolerate it, she liked it. The group chat changed too. Fewer complaints, more updates about community events, lost pets, birthday parties, and even a shared photo of a baby bird that had hatched in Rachel's hanging planter. Karen posted in the chat for the first time in weeks. Karen. "Thanks to everyone who reminded me, directly or not, what this neighborhood really is. If anyone ever needs help with yard work or muffins, I'm your girl." The message got a flood of thumbs-ups and heart emojis. Weeks turned into months, and by summer, Karen had become known not as the neighborhood watchdog, but as someone genuinely helpful. She hosted a block potluck in her newly revived backyard, and even invited the inspector who had once cited her. He came. So did almost every household on the street. That evening, as twilight softened the sky and kids chased fireflies between the trimmed hedges and fresh flowers, Karen stood near the grill, flipping burgers and laughing at something Tom had said. A few people joked about the backyard saga and the famous raccoon rumors, but now the laughter was light-hearted. The story had become folklore, a funny tale with a happy ending, the kind of thing people tell newcomers to explain why the street feels just a little closer than others. Karen didn't mind. She smiled through it all. Because she knew. Sometimes it takes being called out to find your way back in.